Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Scream 6, which is yet another follow-up to this franchise that I really have a complicated relationship for, but I really also love pretty much every single film in this franchise. And you can add yet another one to that list because I really liked Scream 6, and I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with this. And of course I want to talk about spoilers for this film because I think it is a very interesting follow-up to that last film that came out last year. That was kind of the requel to this franchise, and I will say that this film really does take a step forward in terms of the brutality and the tension of this franchise, because I think there are like maybe 3 or maybe even 4 set pieces in this film that are just absolutely nail-biting tension sequences. But before I get into the core 4 characters and how Ghostface is trying to go after these 4 characters, let's get into the opening scene of this movie, because of course Scream movies are known for their opening scenes, especially that original film that has one of my favorite opening scenes of any film of all time. And of course this one we're going to have to try to do something new and different. So we're following Samara Weaving's character, which kind of broke my heart right at the beginning because I love Samara Weaving. If you haven't seen a movie called Mayhem, it's a little indie movie with Stephen Yeun in it that I absolutely love. Definitely go check that out. Samara Weaving is a great actress, and of course she was in Ready or Not. That is the directors of this film also did that film with her, and so starting off with her in this film, you know she's going to die because it's an opening scene of a Scream movie. So like I said, broke my heart right away because we get to see her trying to go on this date. She's at this bar waiting for her date to show up, and she gets a phone call, of course, because it is a Scream movie. And on the phone, I thought they kind of spoiled themselves and kind of messed up, because on the phone you hear very clearly that it's Tony Revolori from, you know, a lot of great movies like The Grand Budapest Hotel and the Spider-Man trilogy that came out recently. He's a great actor, but has a very recognizable voice if you know who he is as an actor. And, you know, he's saying all this stuff kind of luring Samara Weaving outside of her house, and the contact photo of him is some just random guy that is definitely not Tony Revolori. So it's like, did they just spoil their killer right off the bat? And then you get to see Ghostface attack her in this alley and kill her in this alley in a very brutal and bloody way. And then Ghostface takes off his mask, and lo and behold, it's Tony Revolori. You're revealed who the killer is right away, or so you think. You get to follow Tony Revolori as he goes back to his, you know, dorm room. He's trying to talk to his buddy who's also in on this Ghostface killings. They're going to try to go after Tara and after Sam because they have their own reasons of continuing off the kills from the last film. But then you get to see that he gets a phone call, and Ghostface is now calling him, and he thinks it's his buddy, luring him on this little hot and cold game inside of this dorm room until Ghostface, you know, leads him to the refrigerator, and he sees his buddy inside the refrigerator already killed, and the Ghostface pops up behind him and then kills Tony Revolori. So you think you get to know the killer right off the bat, which I'll get into that in a second here, but that's not the case. He dies also at the beginning of this movie, and that's the real opening kill. Because if it was just a Samara Weaving thing, honestly, I was kind of underwhelmed by that. But the fact that it followed Tony Revolori in this whole thing made this opening sequence pretty memorable to me. And like I said, I want to get into the idea of knowing who the killer is a little bit earlier on in a Scream movie, a little bit later on in this video. And so what exactly are Sam and Tara up to in this film? And so essentially Tara is off in college with Chad and Mindy, and they're going off to this frat party, and they're having a great old time. Melissa Barrera's character as Sam is kind of dealing with the struggle of what happened in the last film. She's going to a therapist, and she's talking to him, saying that yes, she went through all this traumatic stuff. She reveals to him that she is the daughter of Billy Loomis, and all this dark pain that she has, you know, seeing him in reflections and kind of feeling the anger and rage within her, and the fact that when she killed the killer in the last film, when she had that rage and she stabbed him over 20 times, she felt right doing it, and she kind of is struggling with the fact that she kind of enjoyed what she did, and she's the daughter of a serial killer who enjoyed killing, and how dangerous that can be for a character like this in a situation where somebody is going after them. And so this is setting up a very interesting story for the Sam character that really separates her from Sydney almost entirely, because in that last film they say, or at least Sydney says directly to her, oh, you're the new me, essentially. You're the new Sidney Prescott for this new requel franchise that you're going to form with these new Scream movies. But no, she's a completely different character. The Sam Carpenter character is Billy Loomis's daughter, and so she has this darkness boiling within her, and I really hope they go in that direction with her character, especially when we get into the end of the film and how brutal she is by the end of it, and how she looks down at her father's mask at the end of the film, and just there's something behind her eyes. And I think Melissa Barrera does a great job, even a better job in this film than she did in the first one. And of course, this film is playing to its strengths, and they have Jenna Ortega. They made the greatest choice ever of not killing her off in the opening scene of that last film. And so you get to have Jenna Ortega as a sister in this movie with a lot of great character moments and beats with Melissa Barrera. They play off of each other really, really great in this film, and she's also a very good stand standout in this film. And she's kind of forming a relationship with Chad in this film, played by Mason Gooding, who is phenomenal in Love, Victor, if I'm going to shout out something that is a little bit lesser known in terms of the TV shows that are on Hulu right now. I think Love, Victor is a great show, and Mason Gooding is phenomenal in that. And of course, I love his dynamic with Jasmin Savoy Brown as Mindy, his twin, and I think that she really does capture that feeling that Randy had in those first two films. Of course, these two characters being the nephews of that character, and she really does kind of slip into that the horror expert that is kind of laying out the rules of this franchise, which of course in this film it's going to be the type of thing where they've realized that it was a requel in the last film, but what happens when you make a sequel to a requel? Well, you're in a franchise now, so that's going to be the meta commentary in this film. So they kind of talk about the rules of this, which is, you know, even the legacy characters are going to be very expendable. At this point, the franchise does not care one bit about killing the legacy characters because they already have in that last film, and now the main characters in this film are also up for grabs. So even Tara and Sam are in grave danger in this film because we are in a franchise. Anything can possibly happen in this film. And so let's get into those nail-biting sequences that I mentioned at the top of the review. And of course, we're going to start off with the bodega sequence, which is the first big thing that Sam and Tara are directly involved with, and they're kind of running into the shop because they're being chased by Ghostface, and these guys at the front counter are kind of defending them because, like, they're in New York City now. There are a lot of people are going to be around for these murders, and so they kind of stand up to Ghostface, but Ghostface does not care one bit in this entire sequence. They just go at all these innocent people, scaring the crap out of everybody. Even the guy behind the counter pulls out a shotgun and tries to take Ghostface out, but of course things get flipped on its side and Ghostface gets the upper hand and he gets the shotgun. And again, with the tension that these directors have in all of their films, really, especially with Ready or Not and now both of these Scream movies, they do a great job building the suspense and building the terror of Ghostface, because Ghostface is a character that is kind of a bumbling idiot in all the Scream movies, and in an endearing way, because yes, he is scary and fun to see him chase characters around in these Scream movies in little goofy ways, but in these two recent Scream movies, he's very intimidating in all of these sequences, and I think that this film especially has brutal kill sequences that really do elevate this character as somebody who you can really be afraid of. And so after that bodega sequence, we get to meet some other new characters in this film, including the new detective, Detective Bailey, and he is also the father of the roommates of Sam and Tara and Mindy and everybody else in this film. And so you get to have this friend group kind of expand. You have this other random guy who's also the roommates of Chad's character, and this is kind of the new friend group in this film. Of course, you have Mindy dating this other girl in this movie. So you have all these different characters all kind of forming into this dorm room because of everything that has happened in this thing. The detective is saying all you guys need to just be all together and try to figure out what is going on. You can't leave New York City, unfortunately. You just have to stay here and figure things out yourself. So you have Sam, Tara, Mindy, and Chad forming the core four characters because they were the ones from that last film, and they were to kind of figure out this new handshake that they can have, and have this neighbor across the street who's also having a relationship with Sam Carpenter in this film, and he notices that Ghostface is in the room with the daughter of the detective, and of course Ghostface starts attacking her. And so you get to see this thing that's happening in this other room, the sequence where this guy's across the street trying to figure out how to help them from all the way across this entire alleyway that is kind of dividing these two buildings, and you get a great nail-biting sequence of them trying to cross this ladder over to the other room because the detective's daughter gets sliced up and she supposedly dies. We'll get into her in a minute here, but then you get to have the girlfriend character to Mindy's character also get sliced up in a very brutal way. She gets stabbed in the chest and ripped upwards, and she's just bleeding out throughout this entire sequence where she's trying to cross this ladder. And this is one of the reasons why I think this movie is being released in 3D, and I'd be curious to see how well the 3D transfer is for this film. But this ladder sequence was absolutely terrifying. I think this was probably my favorite sequence in the entire movie because of how suspenseful it was next to the train sequence a little bit later on, but it was a great scene, and I was so heartbroken when that girl was trying to cross that ladder and she's kind of bleeding out from her chest and she's very desperate to get across from this thing, and Ghostface gets into the room and he grabs the ladder and starts shaking and tilting it, and she falls to her death down this alley. And it is heartbreaking because you get to see Jasmin Savoy Brown just really cry out for her girlfriend in this moment, and it was a very heartbreaking scene. In terms of the returning cast members, we have Gale Weathers in this film as well, and of course we have Kirby returning back from the fourth film. And in terms of Gale Weathers' character, she apparently wrote the book after the last movie, which she said she was not going to do because of everything that happened with Dewey in that film, and of course she decided to write the book anyway, and I think that these Scream movies are always trying to figure out what to give Gale Weathers to do besides being that investigative reporter who wants to write a book, and I feel like they always keep on going back to that storyline, even though I think that she can have a lot more to do in these films besides just being that investigative journalist, and maybe just have her be a very good supporting character, a friend that wants to fight back against these people, kind of like the role Sydney had in the last film, instead of her just being kind of pigeonholed to her career in this franchise. But I did enjoy seeing her in this film, and of course you get a great sequence with her, of course, being chased around with Ghostface, and that was yet another brutal sequence because you really don't know if they're going to kill off yet another legacy character, and they come very, very close to killing off Gale in this film, but luckily she survives this film as well. And in terms of Kirby's character, she was a favorite of mine from that fourth film, and I think she is quite a big fan favorite from the franchise. I guess I'm more speaking so for myself, but I was very excited to see what role she was going to have in this film, and she's kind of more tied to the detective character because she is apparently in the FBI now, and I think they also question the fact that she's so young and somehow she's already in the FBI and she's getting this case, and there's a lot of question marks you can put around this character of why is she back, why is she all of a sudden in the FBI, and there's some doubt that's given to her character of her possibly being a suspect in this film. I think she was one of the best red herrings in this film because, for one, she's a lovable returning character, and for them to go for a returning character to be the Ghostface killer in a Scream movie would be a very interesting choice to make. It'd be a big swing, and of course you have a character that everybody loves who is kind of the Randy replacement in that fourth film, and she was just so great in this role, and her coming back as this agent in this film was an interesting choice, and that red herring element really did work for me, and I think it tricked me, or not necessarily tricked me, but if they did go down that direction, I think I would have bought it. I think the writing for this character was good enough for me to think, yes, maybe she could be the killer. But luckily, she is not the killer by the end of this film. You just get to see her as a great asset that the Core 4 can use, and a great scene where her and Mindy kind of talk about horror films in this very nerdy and geeky way that I ate that up. I love Kirby as a character, and I think she fit into this movie very well. And so the next nail-biting sequence I want to talk about in this video is going to be the train sequence, because of course that was highlighted in the very first teaser for this film, kind of announcing that this film will take place in New York City, and I love this idea where they're all on this train and they see a bunch of other people during Halloween wearing Ghostface masks, because of course the Stab franchise is really big within this franchise itself, and so of course this costume is going to be very popular on Halloween, and how are these characters going to react when they get on a train full of a bunch of different ghost faces? There's a lot of great elements of tension that you can build from this idea, and that's exactly what they do in this sequence. And from it being in the teaser trailer, I was convinced this was going to be early on in the film, but at this point, we're in the back half of the movie. The whole thing with Gale has already happened, and they're all going to try to travel from where they were to the final battle area, which they found this theater full of a bunch of Scream memorabilia. They have all the different costumes from all the different killers in this film, and the killers are leaving them as little clues throughout the film, kind of counting down all the way to the final event of this story. And so you get to see these characters trying to travel on this train, and they get split up because of course the New York train is unforgiving, and these crowds are just going to be all over the place. And of course Mindy is going to be the one left behind on this train. It's very, very stressful because I love the Mindy character. She's the Randy of this film, and of course if you've seen the other films, you know that Randy died in the sequel to the first film, I guess, of the franchise, and this is kind of the sequel to the first one of this requel franchise, and so you are very stressed for Mindy's character in this sequence, and the editing is great because you're cutting between the people on the first train and the people on the second train, with Mindy being left behind with this random character who is the random virgin roommate of Chad's character, and so she's very distrustful, she's keeping a distance, and all these ghost faces are around her, getting her very unsettled, and there's one that's sitting down, kind of looking down at the ground, and he's the one that feels the most suspicious. And of course he gets up at one point, he slowly gets closer and closer and closer to Mindy, and she almost dies a second time in this film. She gets stabbed like twice in the gut before the train stops and the killer has to get off the train. But I was very, very worried for Mindy in this sequence, but of course she is a phenomenal character, a fan favorite at this point in this series, and I really hope they never do anything to the twins of this film because they really put them through their paces in this film. And so once Sam, Tara, and Chad get to the final theater, the place where everything is going to go down at the end of the film, they tell Danny to hold back because they don't really know if they can trust him just yet. So they go into this theater with Kirby's character, and Sam gets a phone call from the detective saying that Kirby was fired from the FBI. And this is what I'm saying about the red herring, because you have this detective saying that Kirby was fired from the FBI, that her kind of mental state is dwindling right now, and she feels very on the edge, and she feels like she could snap at any moment, and maybe she is the killer. This trap that she has set, maybe it is for them, and they have just kind of walked into Ghostface's plan this entire time. And at this point my mind was kind of reeling. I really did not trust the detective character. There's just something about him. I guess maybe it's because he's a cop. I just didn't trust him. I didn't know what to think about his character, and so I thought he was the killer right from the get-go, and I got it right because he is one of them. But I also thought that maybe they would make Kirby the other killer, because at one point you have the detective's daughter say that she lost a brother at some point in the past, and I was trying to think of, okay, that's very suspicious. I think maybe she's the killer, but of course she dies supposedly in that sequence at the dorm room, and so my wheels are kind of spinning. It's like, who can be the son of this detective, also the brother of that girl, the roommate in this film? And I was trying to think who it could be, and I was trying to tie it to Kirby's character because they're setting her up as a red herring. So I was thinking maybe it's that killer from the fourth movie, Charlie Walker, played by Rory Culkin, and I thought maybe he was in the right age gap, because if you think it's Stu, it can't be Stu. I know a lot of people want Stu to come back in this franchise, but he would be a little too old to be that brother character, and so maybe I thought it was going to be Charlie, but maybe the age gap still wouldn't be right, but it would also tie in Kirby. Maybe Kirby would want a revenge against these characters because she just wants the whole Ghostface thing to end, so she takes out all the people that would possibly be the threats of Ghostface, since the first people to die in this film were the other Ghostfaces that were going to supposedly kill Sam and Tara. So to stop the franchise in general, you have to kill the main characters so the franchise can no longer go on, and maybe that could be the motivation for Kirby. I thought that could possibly be a thing, but that is not the case. Kirby is framed by the detective and his two kids, being the roommate earlier in the film that you think died, which I kind of thought was a little bit suspicious when she died, because you didn't get to see the actual stab wounds. Her body is just kind of thrown at the main characters in that sequence, so that makes sense that that was a staged killing. And of course the detective being able to go in and change the body and change the evidence to kind of warp it into his favor. And of course you have the random virgin guy who is also the roommate of Chad's character. He's also the other brother of this family, and of course the brother who died was going to be Richie, who was played by Jack Quaid in that last film, and so it's tying directly into Scream 5 instead of the other Scream movies. So I think this is an interesting direction that this series is going. It's kind of separating itself from the legacy characters and kind of building a series on its own, because they're kind of separating, you know, the Sam Carpenter character from Sidney Prescott. She's her own thing. She has this darkness within her that Sidney never had, and so they're separating in that way. They're killing off the legacy characters, and of course, yes, they're bringing in people like Gale Weathers still. They're bringing in Kirby back for this film, but they're really kind of standing on its own and dealing with the characters that have a direct relation and a direct conflict with Sam's character. And I think that's very important for this franchise going forward, to do things that are a little bit new and different, because when it is revealed that it's the family members of Richie, I always hate all the exposition scenes in these Scream movies. I don't think there's a single good one, and that includes the first one. I hate that exposition scene from that first one just as much as I do all the other ones. I think some of them are better well written than others, and I think this one was one of the worst ones. Once the killers are revealed in these movies, they really just struggle with not necessarily the tension, because I think these final battle sequences in all of these movies are all pretty decent, minus maybe the third one feels a little bit deflated, because I think the reveal of the killer was so lackluster that I just really didn't care at that point. No, but none of the other films kind of had that problem, so this one also doesn't really have that problem. I thought the actor playing the detective went way too over the top at the end of this film. I honestly didn't really think he was that good. Kind of reminded me of the mom in the second movie, which I also think that she went a little bit over the top. Even though I really like that second film, I think the second one is still my favorite. All these films, as soon as they do the final reveal, it all kind of deflates me, which is why I don't think any of the Scream movies are necessarily amazing to me. I love a lot of them. I think they're a lot of fun to watch, and I think the formula really does work, and I think the meta commentary as time moves on warrants this franchise to keep on making new installments. I'm glad they're still making these Scream movies, but I feel like at this point, if you're going to make any drastic change to the Scream movies, change the main problem, at least for me, which is the monologue sequences where the killers explain their motives, because I never find them interesting. I never think that the performances are all that great to warrant this monologue. I never think that the writing in these monologues all make it all worth it. I feel like they kind of over-explain themselves. In this movie, they make the sin, I guess, of exactly saying who killed who in this movie, and I feel like that was also a little bit of a mistake. And so rather than just complaining about the monologues and saying that I don't like them, I actually have a pretty damn good solution that I think would be great to see in a Scream movie in the future, and I think it all kind of stemmed from Mindy's character saying in this film that she always misses the final monologues by the killer in these films, and she always tries to guess who the killers are. And what if you have a Scream movie, maybe the next film, Mindy figures it out, and instead of the killer kind of telling their own motives, you have Mindy explaining the motives. And I think what kind of also makes makes this idea work for me is the fact that the Knives Out movies, yes, I'm bringing up Rian Johnson in a franchise that made fun of Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi in the last installment, but when he has his Knives Out films, it's a great whodunit because you have a character like Benoit Blanc who has a lot of personality, who's great at those exposition scenes, who we all know that Jasmin Savoy Brown does a great job at explaining the rules, so she's a fun character to listen to. If she's explaining and she's like, I figured it out, it's you, and this is why, and you have the killers kind of, maybe they reveal themselves, and maybe they have her explain a little bit even more, or maybe you have Jasmin Savoy Brown not in actual contact with these killers, but maybe she's telling, like, maybe Tara is separated from Sam in the next film, and Tara's like, who's the killers? And Jasmin's like, oh, I know exactly who it is, and she explains while we're cutting to Sam in danger by these killers and them revealing themselves, so you don't have them necessarily explaining it to Sam. They're actively trying to kill Sam, and they're trying to race to get to Sam in order to save her. I think that would be a great way to kind of fix this monologue thing, because it never works for me, and I think the one thing that can really help this franchise is fixing the ending moments of this film that really just kind of bother me with the exposition. Another idea that I have that I think would be brilliant, which would be a massive swing for a Scream franchise, would be to reveal the killer a little bit earlier in the film instead of the last 15 minutes, and you have this final fight sequence between the bad guys and the good guys trying desperately to survive to take out the killers at the end of every single Scream movie. What if you reveal the killer and you kind of follow their perspective probably at the beginning of the third act, or maybe even halfway through the film, you reveal the killers to the audience, not to the main characters, and you get to follow both perspectives for a little while. And I think that this movie started off in a way where you revealed Tony Revolori as a potential killer, and I was like, that is awesome. If we're watching this film from the perspective of the killer this time, that is a really big swing for one. It's going to be a very big risk for a Scream movie, but I think it would be an interesting take for a Scream movie to reveal that perspective that we've never seen before, and I really hope they go in that direction. Maybe this was a little test run to see how the audience would react to learning who the killer is in the opening sequence, and maybe that could work in the future, and I think that would be another idea that the Scream franchise could run with that I would absolutely love. But of course, after the whole monologue sequence happens and you have Sam and Tara trying to fight their way through all this, Kirby gets hurt, so she's kind of out of this final fight, and you get to have Sam really go all out and just absolutely murder the crap out of Richie's family, which was very satisfying, mainly because I didn't really like any of them and they really deserve to die. And it was pretty funny when all of them went out in a very satisfying way, especially when Jenna Ortega just sticks a knife right in that guy's mouth. It was absolutely brutal, and I just loved the brutality of this film. I thought it was an interesting direction to take this film, kind of building those stakes and that suspense in a very satisfying way. And so I did like how this movie ended, and again, I mentioned it earlier on, Sam's character looking down at her father's mask and kind of having that darkness boil within her. I really hope that if they make another sequel to the Scream franchise and you follow this up on a kind of a trilogy capping storyline with Sam and Tara, and you have Sam's character really dealing with this darkness, and maybe she does something terrible. There was this fan theory a while ago where maybe you're following a bunch of new characters and people are dying in this friend group and you don't know who it is, and it turns out that the main characters of this new Scream franchise are actually the killers, and it turns out that the Ghostface character was them the entire time, but then they start dying off. All these different killers start dying off, and you're wondering, now who's killing the killers? And the Ghostface reveals himself to be Sydney, and I think that was the original fan theory, but instead maybe it could be Sam's character is kind of hunting down all the copycat killers, and once she figures out that there's another random copycat killer somewhere in the US, she tracks them down and kills those killers. So I think there's interesting directions you can go with the Sam character, and I really hope they dig into that darkness and kind of turn her into a little bit of an anti-hero, or even the villain of the next film in some sort of way, because they have a great storyline set up for her, and I think they can really knock it home with a capping trilogy, outing for this franchise. That would be very, very cool. So that'll be my review and my thoughts on Scream 6. There's probably some things that I wanted to talk about in this review that I didn't quite get to, so if there's anything that I missed, definitely comment down below what you thought of the movie as a whole and what else you want to talk about with this film, because I did really enjoy it. If I were to rank it, I still think I would put the second Scream. I just really love that one so much. That's going to go as number 1. Then the original Scream will go as number 2. Number 3 will probably be the 2022 Scream movie. I really do like Scream 5. I think that would be number 3. And I think right underneath that, I would put this film, because I think it's almost as good as the last outing, but I think the killers were not as satisfying in this one. But the killers always kind of grow on me as time goes on, so maybe I'll like them even more on second watch. And then underneath that, I'll put Scream 4, which I also do really like that film. And the only one that I'm kind of iffy on, that I don't really love all that much is Scream 3, but I do think that movie has some enjoyment to be had either way. So those are going to be my rankings. What are your thoughts on Scream 6, and what are your rankings as well? Like I said, comment down below, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. I hope to see you all in my next one.